What's going on, guys? Come on in. We're about ready to start another episode of Jimmy Rants. As always, if you're brand new to the show, we do this show here on Instagram Live. I simulcast also over here on Facebook Live. And yeah, it's a fun show that we do where we highlight various things in the news that are going on that might be of interest to you if you are interested in nutritional health. Talk a lot about keto and just lifestyle things in general. And we throw in lately, since I've been back from being away for 6 months, I've been talking about childhood trauma. So all kinds of things to talk about here on Jimmy Rants. So how do you access the show? You go to jimmyrants.com. We've got all the archives of the past shows there. We also have YouTube. So if you type in a keyword search, Jimmy Rants there, you'll find past episodes as well at Living Low-carb Man over there. So youtube.com/Living Low-carb Man, LIVIN LOWCARBMAN. Once you're there, you can see all the Jimmy Rants are there at the top of the page, and we feature this show there. And of course, if you want to access the show live, we do these generally around 11 a.m. Eastern, which this one is, and then 5 p.m. Eastern if I do a second one. Sometimes I'll switch the schedule if I'm traveling or something like that. But for the most part, that's our schedule: 11 a.m., 5 p.m., and we do the show. So if you want to follow me on Instagram Live, go follow at Living Low-carb Man over on Instagram. But guys, I want to do an update on a story that I first told you about a year ago. So we know the food in hospitals is 100% absolutely atrocious. If you've ever had to be hospitalized, and you've seen the kinds of foods that they not only serve you as a patient, but when you're visiting those patients and you go to the cafeteria to find some food, it is loaded with junk food. There's all kinds of vending machines that have Coca-Cola type of products and other sodas. You've got chips and candy bars and cookies and you name it, the crappy garbage. It's kind of like when I travel, I stop at rest areas and I'll go and look at their vending machines just to see what they offer. And more times than not, about 99% of the stuff is just pure garbage. Sometimes you'll find some nuts, sometimes you'll find, beef sticks, but for the most part, it's just utter garbage what you find in that. And it's the same way. You see that same stuff in the hospital setting. I see my bud Hank Garner just came on over here. He's my web guy, and he was recently in the hospital. I remember, Hank, you sent me a picture of like the little margarine packet, and I see carbs everywhere. So that's the norm, you guys, within a hospital setting. But thankfully, we now have some doctors, or a doctor in West Virginia specifically, who gives a crap about you, the patient, who gives a crap about what it means to show a hospital getting serious about your health. Isn't it ironic? Like the very places that we entrust with health the most have this kind of thing going on that would compromise your health the most. I mean, has that never seemed odd to anybody before, that you would go to a hospital and this great purveyorship of let's get you as healthy as we possibly can, and meanwhile, what are we serving? A bunch of crap. Sugar, grains, you name it. Junk food. So that's something that Dr. Mark Cucuzzella took personally. Now, Mark's been a good friend of mine for many years. I've had him on the Living La Vida Low Carb show a few times. He is an amazing human being. If you don't know who Mark Cucuzzella is, those of you that live in West Virginia, you know who he is abundantly, because he's making some big changes, you guys, happen in his local hospital where he works at, where he's the doctor at. And he made this proposal a couple years ago. Why don't we remove all the sugar from the hospital? Just not serve it. And I remember it was about a year ago they finally decided to implement it. This is like one of the first hospitals in America that went completely sugar-free. Huge story. And I remember we did a Jimmy Rants about it, all about it at the time. Maybe we'll try to find the link to that one and put it in the show notes, like on YouTube, so that you guys can see the other video that I did about this. But There's an update to the story, you guys, because the local newspaper there decided to do an update on how it's going since this sugar-free effort in a hospital happened. So there is Dr. Mark Cucuzzella. Really nice guy. Don't let his nerdiness fool you. He is cooler than cool. I promise you. And Dr. Cucuzzella is, like I said, a really amazing human being. So humble, so kind. He's always been very supportive of my work. And you're just attracted to good people like that. And I think he probably used that charm and that kindness to really make this happen. So again, we're heavily indebted to him for paving the way for something that should be nationwide, worldwide. All right, so let's read the story. A man on a mission. After years of advocacy by Dr. Mark Cucuzzella, West Virginia University Medicine Jefferson Medical Center decided to remove all sugary drinks from its vending machines and their cafeteria, proving that hospitals can be a beacon of health. And like I said earlier, isn't it amazing? We've accepted this role of the hospitals are the purveyor of health, and yet we still saw them selling junk food in that same hospital. It just seems so odd. So let's read the story. Imagine this scenario. A patient with lung disease goes to the hospital and the doctors say, get this, smoke a cigarette, it'll make you feel better. Sounds ridiculous, right? Now imagine this. A patient with diabetes goes to the hospital. While the patient is lying in bed, the doctor visits and lunch is served. Chicken pot pie, a side of rice, steamed broccoli, graham crackers, and a bottle of apple juice. Anybody been there in the hospital? Thankfully, I've never been like hospitalized before, so I don't know what they serve you, but I know enough people in my life who have. Like I said, Hank, my web guy who came in over here, he was recently in the hospital for 3 days. And it's atrocious what they're feeding patients. Now, a type 2 diabetic should never eat all those things we just mentioned. And yet that's exactly what they serve them. The doctor is explaining to the patients the importance of controlling their blood sugar through low-carb food choices. All the while, they're eating this very high-carb meal. The patient looks down at his tray and says, "You're telling me that this stuff is killing me? Why are you serving it to me?" That would be a great conversation. What would the doctor say? "Oh, doc, you said I need to be eating lower carb, but this meal that is the diabetic meal that they just served me is so full of carbs." What would the doctor say back? Like they would have no response to that. And yet it happens every single day. They serve those kinds of things to people they know have out of control blood sugar and insulin levels. This is happening all the time, all over the state of West Virginia and ostensibly all over the United States. One place is making a difference. The Jefferson Medical Center at the West Virginia University Medicine, in large part thanks to Dr. Mark Cucuzzella. He's a man on a mission, and after hearing his story, you'll agree it's time for other hospitals to follow suit. Oh man, could you imagine if they proved the efficacy of getting rid of sugary drinks and foods out of hospitals? The ripple effect that would have? What it would mean is all of those things that you're served in a hospital as a patient would also have to go away. How could they, and I don't know if that's true here in West Virginia, but how can they remove the sugar from the cafeteria and from the vending machines and still serve sugary things? Even the apple juice. They go, "Oh, it's apple juice, it's from apples." Look at an apple juice ingredients list. It's very rarely just apple juice, purified apple juice. It's very rare. But even then, it's still sugar. It's right from fruit, so it's fructose. And that fructose goes right to your liver, natural or otherwise, and causes problems. West Virginia has the highest rate of diabetes in adults in the nation. 16% of the population has type 2 diabetes in West Virginia. In addition, more than 500,000 people in West Virginia, which is 36% of the adult population, more than 1 in 3, they have pre-diabetes, and most of them don't even know it. They don't know they have pre-diabetes because doctors aren't testing for fasting insulin. They might test blood sugar, but it was like, oh yeah, okay, 110, oh, that's not bad. And they're not getting to the root of it. These staggering statistics mean that nearly half of our state's population is either diabetic or pre-diabetic, and this insidious disease is striking the youngest among us at an alarming rate. This is something nobody's talking about either. Within the context of how we're going to stem the tide of type 2 diabetes, it's happening to kids earlier and earlier and earlier, and that should make people in the know go, why? What is it unique about our kids and the diets that they're eating? What's unique about it that's making them get diabetic? And I can tell you, because today's episode of the Live and La Vida Low-carb show, by the way, features a teenager. So a 14-year-old, she goes by Keto Teen Megan here on Instagram, keto.teen.megan. Go look her up on Instagram and listen to the podcast today on the Live and La Vida Low-carb show. And I asked her, because she used to be a junk food junkie, and because all of her friends were eating that way. And she didn't think anything of it. And it was normal. It was even encouraged. Well, you're a kid. Just be a kid and have whatever you want. And yet she quickly realized she was having health issues. She's 14 now, but around 13, she figured out that she was having trouble. So she wants to now eat keto, not because she has a weight problem, but because she wants to control that risk for having diabetes and other things down the line. And yet, yes, it's out of control. Kids are getting diabetes at alarming rates. And nobody seems to care. Like, nobody seems to want to look at the root causes. And the root causes is part of what Dr. Cucuzzella is onto here in West Virginia. Get rid of the sugar. Let's not pretend like that sugar's not having an impact. And while he's getting it out of a hospital, I think we need it out of public schools. I think it just needs to not be put in places where people are most susceptible for getting sicker from it. And look at all the places where crappy garbage is. Convenience stores, hospitals, public schools, rest areas, you name it. The access to all of these things is too easy. And from the kid standpoint, I wonder, because we've done it with cigarettes and alcohol, I wonder if you could put, and there's going to be an uprising if this ever happened, but I wonder if you could put not appropriate for children under the age of 18 on anything that has high amounts of sugar. I know, sounds preposterous, right? Like, who would think about putting a warning label on sugary foods? Now, of course, these food manufacturers, they don't want that at all, because their big consumer of candy and cookies and all that is the kids. And so they would have a conniption fit. But how cool would it be if there was a warning on there? Just like they put a warning on cigarettes, just like they won't sell alcohol to a minor. It would be really cool. All right, let's go back to the story. If you joined us late, there is a hospital in West Virginia who decided about a year ago to go completely sugar-free. I did a whole Jimmy Rants all about this. Dr. Mark Cucuzzella, a medical doctor that works at this hospital, WVU Medicine Jefferson Medical Center, and he was able to convince them, he went to all the administrators and convinced them that they needed to lead the charge on this. So he got all the sugar removed from the cafeteria and the vending machines. Pretty cool. I definitely want to visit this hospital at some point, maybe do a live Jimmy Rants from it so you can kind of see. And I'll walk around to the vending machines and in the cafeteria. Now, they still have grains, they still have other things, but how cool would it be to look at a vending machine and see fresh foods? Whole lot better than the crap they serve now. The environment is set up to make kids sick, and it is federally subsidized, said Dr. Cucuzzella, talking about where the kids at school and in hospitals, they're all getting access to this food that's not doing them any good. If kids go to school and drink 2 cartons of strawberry or chocolate milk a day for free, all funded by our federal government under the assumption that it's healthy, then we're basically giving them a toxin, poisoning them in plain sight. You know what I loved about this story? they let Dr. Cucuzzella's words, as he said them, stand. Can I tell you how rare that is in journalism? I've been interviewed a lot of times for newspaper stories. I've had television interviews. I've had radio interviews. They sometimes creatively edit. And when you edit and you wash down and water down what the intention was in the comments to begin with, you usually don't get the oomph that you're looking for. Like I'm usually no punches pulled. Like I will bluntly say things hoping they'll print that. Well, guess what? So did Dr. Cucuzzella. And so that line there where he's talking about we're basically giving them a toxin, poisoning them in plain sight, like that's going to be powerful for people to read, because maybe people aren't realizing, oh my gosh, yes, we are poisoning our kids by serving that stuff. The addiction to sugar starts young, and according to Dr. Cucuzzella, the only way to tackle the problem is to change our federal and state policies. So the World Health Organization, quoting from Dr. Cucuzzella, even in their position statements, which are generous about sugar because they assume people are healthy, say that we should have no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar a day, but we're feeding kids 6 to 7 teaspoons of added sugar in just one container of that little chocolate milk they get at school. And that's just one little carton of milk. They drink 2 of those a day, so 14 teaspoons of added sugar just from drinking the milk. I remember when I was a kid in elementary school, a long time ago, and yeah, all of us got chocolate milk. They even brag about it on the television commercials now. I know Klay Thompson, who plays for the Golden State Warriors in the National Basketball Association, he's like a spokesperson for chocolate milk, and he's talking, oh, I drink chocolate milk because it gives me energy and it gives me protein. But what they're not telling you you're getting from that chocolate milk is a whole lot of sugar. How do you think they make it taste so sweet? It's sugar, and then lactose in it already, because you know it's usually 2%. We talked about this yesterday on Jimmy Rants. 2% milk has a lot of sugar. And so we're glorifying this very thing that we know is an obesogen. We know kids are getting fat. We know kids usually are getting more insulin resistant and more susceptible to diabetes. And then it's federally funded makes it even worse. Dr. Cucuzzella said all of this is criminal. He knows firsthand the dangers of diabetes. As a general practice physician who served in the military, he supervised a newly implemented fitness test for soldiers. He noticed that obesity was the biggest reasons why the soldiers failed the test. I realized pretty quickly I didn't know anything about obesity as a doctor. That's profound, guys. Doctors pretend like they know all the reasons why you're fat. Can I tell you, a doctor has no idea why you're fat. He thinks in his mind, or she thinks in their mind, if they're traditionally trained, they think the reason you're fat is you're a glutton, that you don't have any willpower, that you don't know how to cut your calories, you don't know how to cut your fat, and you don't exercise enough. That's the totality of challenging obesity for a general practitioner. Has any of that ever worked? Has anybody gone on that and it becomes their sustainable way to live for the rest of their lives? I know absolutely 0 people where that works. I know a lot of people that went keto and they changed their diet to low carb, moderate protein, high fat, real whole foods, minimally processed foods, periods of intermittent fasting. I know a whole lot of people that did that and they got healthier and they got lower in weight. I don't know many people that went on the standard American diet and got healthy. What we learned in med school is burn more calories than you eat. If you're fat, then you have a problem with willpower, but now we know that's not the whole story. He's right. That is what they're taught. So it becomes a let's blame the patient thing rather than, maybe this effed up advice we're giving that patient isn't working. Gee, imagine that. In fact, after a routine medical exam, Dr. Cucuzzella, who is a thin marathon runner, found out that his blood sugar was high. He said, I was in the pre-diabetic stage, almost a full-blown diabetes patient, and I was running in marathons and naturally thin. Weird, right? He is a very thin guy, by the way. I've seen him. He's a little guy compared to me. I'm 6'3". But man, it'll hit. Weight is not the factor here. We talked about this yesterday with WHO having target rates of obesity, and we're not meeting them. This story that Dr. Cucuzzella just talked about of himself proves that it's not just about the weight that we're looking at here. There's plenty of thin insulin-resistant people. There's plenty of thin type 2 diabetics. Type 2 diabetes does not always manifest as obesity. We got to get this out of our head. And when they started tying obesity and type 2 diabetes together, in fact, there's this term diabesity. It's not a general rule. Yes, a lot of people who get type 2 diabetes happen to be fat and vice versa, but don't assume that your thinness prevents you from having type 2 diabetes. In fact, when you don't have weight on the body, you're at more risk for dying if you're thin and you get type 2 diabetes. I would rather have weight on the body. And again, I'm going to do a Jimmy Rants about that soon to explain the positiveness that weight is on the body. After further testing and wearing a CGM, so one of those continuous glucose monitors, I'll probably show one to you guys on camera soon and talk about it. Cucuzzella found out that he was developing maturity onset diabetes of the young. He eliminated all starchy carbohydrates and sugars, the buckets of cereal and pasta he had been eating as a runner, and found that his sugar levels were just fine. So here's a marathon runner who had been taught as a marathon runner, if you want to run marathons, you have to load up on carbs. He'd always believed that. And the moment he stopped loading up on carbs, this blood sugar dysregulation controlled itself, and he had normal blood sugars. And oh yeah, by the way, he still runs races in a fat adapted state, and he finds that it's a cleaner fuel now for his running than it was when he was on all those carbs. When I came to Jefferson Medical Center, the standard hospital diet for diabetes was 60 to 80 grams per meal. So if they feed them 3 meals in a day in the hospital for the diabetics, 60 to 80 grams per meal. At the top end of things, that's 240 grams of carbohydrate. Sugars, grains, starches. That's crazy, right? Like you and I that know that's a whole lot of carbs, we would never, as a type 2 diabetic, eat that many carbs. And yet that's exactly what the hospital was doing. Dr. Cucuzzella continued, I knew just by the science of my own monitors that 10 grams of carbs raises a diabetic's blood sugar by about 40 points. So here they were giving them 60 to 80. So I'm not a mathematician, but that raises your blood sugar 240 to 320. That's a whole lot of raising of your blood sugar, all for having carbs that then you cover up with diabetes medications and insulin. Like, how messed up are we when we think that's normal? So, with Dr. Cucuzzella's leadership, the hospital implemented a meal option that only contained 10 grams of carbs. Good for him. So he led that change long before the sugar-free in the cafeteria happened. He led that charge. If you give anyone who has diabetes 60 grams of carbs a meal, you're going to have to chase that with insulin, which is what I just said. That's a rocky road. The alternative is don't give them the 60 grams. We tell our patients this, here's your options. You can have this high carb meal, make sure you take all the medications after you eat that, or we can try this type of eating, which is actually how your grandparents ate. We're gonna give you double eggs, extra meat or fish, extra salad, and not have to give you any insulin. I like the way he frames that, like where he's like, you know what? I'll let you have all the carbs you want, but you're gonna have to take this crap load of medicines and insulin to cover it up. Or you won't have to take any insulin, won't have to take any diabetes medications, just eat this delicious, nutritious, and wonderful low-carb keto food. I wonder how many people would take the meds just to get their crap. I don't know. You guys have thoughts on that? What percentage of people would choose the crap and take the meds versus eating all those foods that he mentioned? and not having to take any meds? It's an interesting thought process. A couple years later, after seeing great success with all these changes that I just described, a handful of nurses and doctors came together, decided to propose eliminating all sugary drinks from the hospital. Vending machines, soda fountains in the cafeteria, sugary protein shakes, all of these things given to patients too. Cucuzzella says, it just made too much sense to me. It took about a year, but it's all about teamwork, a few disruptive people. We were fortunate to have highly receptive leadership in our organization. Although Cucuzzella says everyone has been supportive, there were some legal hoops that the hospital had to jump through. Hospital systems that are part of universities have the same contracts for vending as the football stadium. Oh, you know where this is going. Ever been to a football game and seen the sponsors on the stadium? Who are they? A lot of crappy garbage companies. Coca-Cola is the exclusive provider of beverages on West Virginia University campuses. So West Virginia University, this hospital that's now sugar-free, is affiliated with that college, and thus with these relationships with these companies like Coca-Cola. So we had to put a clause in the contract for this institution that we could opt out of that responsibility, that it would be okay if we lost money. In other words, Coca-Cola paid them to carry and have Coca-Cola products in their hospital. But now that's gone. You're okay with that. Why sell your soul all at the altar of having a little bit of extra money to do other things with in a hospital? That's brave, guys. Like, we should applaud that they were willing to turn down money because their integrity was too important, because the cause of not being beholden to special interests and getting sugar out of these hospitals where patients desperately need to get off of sugar. That's a bold move, and I really admire them for doing that. But these are just some of the contractual issues that you have to deal with. So if there's another hospital watching this right now on YouTube, or you're watching it live on Facebook or Instagram Live, these are the challenges you're going to have to deal with. And, you know, we've seen this before. I talked about a story last year on Jimmy Rants about there's like a Subway and McDonald's right inside of hospitals. Why are we selling junk crap fast food in a hospital? We've got to let go of these corporate ties to these food companies because they're not serving the patient's needs. Some would argue, oh, well, they're going to go outside the hospital and eat whatever they want. Fine. Outside the hospital, it's a free-for-all. Go buy whatever you want. But in a hospital setting where they're supposed to be about health, why are we encouraging it? Why are we allowing something that we know is not ever good for anyone? Tell me what you get from McDonald's that ever serves a good purpose in your life and your health. There's nothing. Not a thing at all. So, since they got past the contract issues with Coca-Cola, got rid of their funding, switched over and became completely sugar-free 1 year ago, the response has been overwhelmingly positive. Patient Jack Williams was on 2 pills a day along with insulin to manage his diabetes. Dr. Cucuzzella introduced him to low-carb. In 3 weeks of eating low-carb, I tossed out all the medications. Pretty typical. One very helpful tool that Dr. Mark recommends is a device called a flash glucose monitor. So again, that's the Freestyle Libre. There's all kind of companies doing this, but Freestyle Libre, you stick it in your arm and it lets you test your blood sugar for a couple weeks. Again, I'll show you guys that on camera soon. I've got about 4 or 5 of those myself. So he used that. It takes away the need for having to stick your finger to get your glucose, so it allows you to check often. So if you don't think that 60 grams of carbs is causing you a problem, put on a CGM. Bloop. Oh, crap. You know, you're going to find out real quick just how sensitive you are to carbs. Now, I don't usually wear one because all I'm eating right now for my meals is almost exclusively ribeye steaks. And so I'm not going to see any movement on the glucose monitor from doing that. But for people who think they can get away with some of these carbs, even so-called legal carbs, even so-called keto treats that are legal, put on a CGM and the truth will set you free, because you will find out some really valuable information about yourself. This is helpful to set boundaries for what you can and cannot eat, since you can see the numbers right away and at any time. People don't realize how high sugar can affect so many things in your body, so using the monitor is a huge preventative measure to keep the body working at its optimum. Dr. Mark has shown me I can have control of my health without drugs just by using food and exercise. He literally saved my life. I got to tell you, I talked to a lot of keto doctors. A lot of them are personal friends of mine, and almost every one of them says, before I found keto and started using it with patients, I hated getting up in the morning to go to work. I felt like I was in prison, where I was giving them the things I was told to give them, but I knew they weren't getting better. I knew there had to be a better way. So there was frustration and lamentation going on in their minds, whereas now they've had their eyes opened and they're really understanding how nutrition is so powerful as a health modality. Now they look forward to going to work. They look forward to talking to patients, and it's still hard work. I talked to Dr. Will Cole, my co-host on my Thursday podcast called Real Talk, and he often says, yeah, man, it was a long day of work, but man, just knowing that I'm having a direct impact on the lives of people, it's so incredibly rewarding, satisfying, knowing that people are getting better. And I wonder how many doctors, and a bunch of them are actually leaving the profession because it's so frustrating, so stressful, that they just don't know that there's a better way they could be doing things. There's a better way to be practicing medicine and helping patients, getting them off of medications, helping them meet their health goals. So if you're a doctor watching this right now and you're frustrated, learn on your own. Don't rely on just what you read in medical school and thinking that's all you ever needed to know. Most of the doctors in the keto space, they came by this because they had patients who got so frustrated with doctors not knowing what they're talking about that the patients did it on their own and then they reported it to them. And you probably had some patients like that who have come to you and said, yeah, I read Keto Clarity and oh my gosh, this makes so much sense and I'm feeling better and I've lost 100 pounds and I came off of all my medications. Are you not interested at all? There's a there, and you definitely have to figure out what it is. Dr. Judy Charlton, the chief medical officer for this hospital, praised Dr. Cucuzzella and the colleagues at the Jefferson Medical Center. We are proud that our Eastern West Virginia University Medicine campus has taken the lead in initiating a sugar-free hospital. They also have taken the lead with culinary medicine and an exceptionally strong metabolic medicine program. That's where he's talking about keto. We're learning from their experience with all these initiatives and will share their expertise with other campuses. Can you imagine that this is the first in a line of radical paradigm shifting happening with hospitals? Like, think about it. This little spark happening in West Virginia could be the impetus for major radical change all around, all across the country. Might come to your area. You live in LA? Who says that the UCLA hospitals don't do this? You live in Chicago? You live in Dallas, Atlanta, Miami, Seattle, all over the United States of America. Can you imagine the ripple effect? And then on top of that, not just the ripple effect of it getting implemented, but then the health effects of the very people who need this message the most, of eliminating sugar from their diet, and personally as patients, eliminating carbohydrates for the most part, and realizing they're not doing them any good at all. Now Dr. Cucuzzella is determined to eliminate sugar drinks from the schools. Oh my goodness. I'm sure he's emboldened now. Like, think about it. 2-3 years ago, he had this idea that he wanted to do something to change policy in his hospital, and he got it done. Now he's going to go to the local public school system and say, hey, I don't think those sugary drinks that you're serving in schools is doing the kids any good. And he'll probably pitch them on, oh, well, we need to eliminate the sugar because it'll help them concentrate. It'll help the kids perform better on their school testing, which the the funding for these schools depends on them passing these tests. Can you imagine? Now, there's already 1 or 2 sugar-free schools I'm aware of. There's one definitely in Georgia that I've done a Jimmy Rants on before. And I think there was one other place. And there might be other places as well. But can you imagine if that becomes something huge, you guys, that becomes the norm? We don't need to feed kids sugar anymore. Not doing them any good at all. So Dr. Cucuzzella is taking that up now. If you understand obesity and diabetes, you know the impact of just the sugar-sweetened beverages. Forget about bread and all the other stuff people argue about. Just the beverages. He's right, because what are kids drinking? They're drinking chocolate milk at school. They're having juice in the morning before they go to school. Sometimes not just pure orange juice. They're having like extra sugar added juices. They're having Coca-Cola. They're having sugary sports drinks. You name it, they are stuffing their mouth with gobs upon gobs upon gobs of pure unadulterated sugar. And here's the worst part of it all. They're kids. That's what kids consume. We should just be okay that kids be kids. Like I said, go listen to that teenager I interviewed on Living La Vida Low Carb show today. Keto Teen Megan. Go listen to that. LLVLC.com, wherever you listen to podcasts. And go look up Keto Teen Megan here on Instagram, keto.teen.megan. You'll see what I'm talking about, you guys. This is real. Like, that's the mentality with kids. And see, kids know that. Kids know, well, I got plenty of time in my life before anything bad happens, and so let me eat, drink, and be merry. And then they grow up to be diabetic and obese adults. And other health issues, autoimmune diseases, PCOS, you name it. Stuff happens, but we could have stopped it early, and Dr. Cucuzzella is trying hard to fix that. If you had to pick one thing in our system, you know, poison in the system, especially for the youth, it's the sugary beverages. Even if they have the pizza, it's the beverages that do the most harm, the sodas, the sweet tea, chocolate milk, even skim milk, juice. People all think these things are healthy. Juice is no different to a child's liver than soda. I've said that for years. People are like, oh, well, orange juice has micronutrients in it. It's better than a Coca-Cola. Well, okay, fine. Micronutrients set aside. Sugar content, identical. Exactly the same. So let's stop pretending like juice is a health food. Juice has never been a health food. But it's gotten away with it, hasn't it? For a very long time. Cucuzzella is trying to affect change on the policy level. We've got to start at hospitals and schools. The flaw in this whole thing is that we're thinking that this is some individual responsibility to prevent diabetes and obesity when the environment is set up to make them sick, and we do it to our children every single day. He's right. We wonder why we have an obesity epidemic, and like we talked about yesterday, the statistics of obesity keep going up and up and up. We wonder why there's more diabetics now than there have ever been before. We wonder why chronic disease doesn't seem to be better, even though they're throwing billions and trillions of dollars at these diseases. They're not getting to the root cause of why the disease developed, and when it develops is very, very early in these kids' life. Now, I don't think a kid needs to diet per se, but let's put them on real whole foods and stop letting them rely on sugary sweetened beverages and junk food as their almost sole way that they eat. And you and I both know a lot of kids, pretty much all they eat is crappy garbage all day long, every single day, year upon year upon year. And then those kids get out on their own, and we all pretend like when they turn 18, they suddenly get smart. No, when you turn 18 and you get out of the house, what do? You eat the way you learned. So you keep eating the junk food, the pizza, the potato chips, the cookies, the snack cakes, the Coca-Cola, and other sugary beverages. You keep eating the way you learn because that's how you learn and that's what you know. That's what happened to me. I never was taught how to eat healthy. So when I got out on my own, was it any surprise I didn't know how to eat healthy? I had heard you cut your fat, cut your calories, and that's, quote, healthy, but I didn't want to do that. I had plenty of time in my life to get all of that straight. Nothing bad's going to happen to me while I'm eating all this crap. Little did I know I would get morbidly obese, weigh 410 pounds, be on the verge of having to be on medications for various things. And I was on high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and on breathing medication before I found the low-carb diet. And it was going to be worse. I would have developed type 2 diabetes had I not made this change. And I would have probably followed my brother Kevin into an early grave. He died at 41 from all the ravages of the crappy garbage he ate when he was a kid. So don't pretend like how we're feeding kids today doesn't matter, because it does. And then we lament that people grow older and they get all these diseases and obesity and we don't know why. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. Let's stop pretending like we don't. They've regulated tobacco. They've regulated every addictive substance that can cause you harm. Most people, including doctors, are heavily addicted to sugar. It's a devastating drug. I think we need to start referring to sugar as a drug. I like that imagery, Dr. Cucuzzella. Very well done. I think that's exactly how this is going to be serious for people to take it more seriously. The moment we think sugar, well, it's just a food, it's just another innocuous ingredient. The moment we think that way is the moment we'll never solve this issue. The moment we look at that not as a food, but as a toxic substance, and that it's a drug that's causing us great harm, is the moment we can make that shift in our heads. It's hard to argue with the sentiment that hospitals and schools should be the beacons of health. Dr. Cucuzzella concluded, in my early days at the hospital, there was a smoking room. Today we say, can you believe we used to allow people to smoke in the hospital? So my dream would be in 10 years, we'll look back on this time and say, can you believe we used to actually serve sugar in schools and hospitals? That's freaking crazy. Every good idea, you guys, has to start with somebody doing it and implementing it and showing it works. And yes, we will look back someday and go, what in the world we were thinking? I've talked about this a lot. When we get beyond this low-fat, low-calorie kind of era that started in 1980 and has come to the present, we're right at like a 40-year period. I think by 45, 50, it's going to end, and we're going to look back on history and go, what in the world were those people doing, vilifying butter and red meat? What were they doing? And it's going to be the dark ages of nutrition in historical perspective. But we're living in the midst of it, and people think, oh my gosh, cut my calories, cut my fat. Let's get out of that. It's been an utter and dismal failure, and thanks to people like Dr. Cucuzzella, which kudos to him, we're seeing changes happen. Incremental, but change is happening. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. Welcome in, welcome in. Going to go to Instagram Live first, and I'll come over if we have time to Facebook. Hello, you guys. Come on in. Make yourselves at home. Carnivore Amy says, what do you think about all the people who are saying that keto carnivore is an extreme diet related to cocaine and addiction? Some of the influencers are posting this. Is that vegans that are saying that keto and carnivore is an extreme diet related to cocaine addiction? I think what you're saying there is they're equating it to addiction in the brain to cocaine. You have an addiction to meat and other foods. Like, I don't believe in this whole idea that you can become addicted to meat. I know the vegans like to say that, and it's very popular. I remember Dr. Neil Barnard, the guy from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. I had him on my podcast several years back, and he said that, oh yeah, people's meat addiction. I was like, there's no meat addiction. What are you talking about? Give me a break. So yeah, they're going to say what they're going to say. Beth says, I had not heard of this. Have they allowed if the 62 sugar aliases instead? What about industrial seed oils, wheat, and did they stock up on toilet paper? Thank you, Beth. Yeah, so it's all sugars of any kind. So they're not letting them hide the sugar. Trust me, Dr. Cucuzzella knows all the names of sugars. Evaporated cane juice, yeah. So this guy's sugar, it's going to be sugar on the nutrition label. So they can hide the sugars in the ingredients, but they can't hide it on the nutrition label. It does rear its ugly head there. As far as seed oils and wheat, They are allowing those still, but it's incremental change. And I think this was a positive start to get the sugar out. Don't be surprised if a year or two from now, Dr. Cucuzzella says, well, you think just eliminating sugar is a big deal. Now let's eliminate the carbohydrates that are suspect, the simple carbohydrates, processed ones, refined grains and starches and things like that. So stay tuned. Lulu says, I was just in the hospital and the menu had each category listed the carbs. I was shocked they don't let you order over a certain recommended meal. They don't. Kara's keto, hey Jimmy, pregnant and not looking forward to hospital food. Well, sometimes people smuggle in food of their own when they're in a hospital. Keto Chrissy Sue, and there's no fiber from the apple when you juice it, correct? Yeah, well, there is fiber, it's just emulsified at that point, but that's not the point. Yeah, if you're gonna eat an apple, don't drink apple juice. Sometimes what people do when they juice is all the pulp and the skin and everything just gets removed and all you got left is just the sugar part. So yeah, much worse. If you're gonna eat an apple, and your body can handle that apple, definitely eat it with the skin on, because that's going to maybe blunt a little bit the effects on your blood sugar, but not really significantly so. Diabetes in kids is on the rise at an alarming rate. It really is, Chrissy. Brandy says, my niece, who is now 12, has high triglycerides. At 8 years old, she was told she would be diabetic if she didn't get them down. That doesn't surprise me. One of the first places you see high sugar and carbohydrate consumption, one of the first places it shows up, not necessarily in blood sugar and insulin, it's triglycerides. Those go up. That's the blood fat, you guys. So it's on a standard cholesterol panel. So if you've got yourself or someone in your life, a youngster, and you want to see what impact those carbohydrates are having on them, if they're eating a lot of them, have their triglycerides run. So not surprised, Brandy. Dolly says sugar used to be kept under lock and key way back when. Yeah, it used to be considered just a treat. Now it's such a regular part of our diet, we don't even think twice about it. Lulu says New York City was trying to limit the big gulp. Yeah, New York City had an initiative. I think Mayor Bloomberg was the one that had you can't have any more than X number of ounces and blah, blah, blah. That was always stupid to me because, all right, what's to stop you from being at one restaurant, getting your 8, 12 ounces, whatever the limit was, then going right next door? Because I've been in New York City. There's literally restaurant, like all through the city. So what would stop you from basically restaurant hopping and getting all the soda you want? So it was nice on paper what he was doing as a PR stunt, but in reality it wasn't going to do anything. Prissy says, it's so true. Sugar addiction starts very young. Babies are born with a preference for sugar. My baby is like that. Well, here's the thing. When a baby is born, they're actually mildly ketotic. They actually have ketosis going on. At a very mild level. And so I don't agree with this notion that they crave sugar. I think they crave nutrition at that point. And if they're breastfed, they're going to get plenty of saturated fats from the breast milk. And that's what their body wants. Now, what happens is parents start feeding them sugary formula and start feeding them, once they start eating solid foods, they start feeding them all these foods that are baby food, and they're usually loaded with sugar. And that's where they get addicted. Thus, as they get older, oh, mommy, I want the snack cakes, I want McDonald's, I want this, I want that, I want the juice, I want the soda. And we wonder how they get that craving for those things. They get it because at a very early age, they don't teach the value and feed them properly when they're at that very impressionable age as a baby and they have no control. Fascinating conversation that went political for some reason. Naughty Bits, I find it interesting that so much of the forward-thinking medical progress comes from the poorer states, talking about West Virginia, makes a great argument for necessity being the mother of invention. Well, they do have the highest rates of diabetes in the nation, and I do think there is a socioeconomic connection here, where lower income people feel desperate to get whatever cheap commodity food they can. And so when you're eating in that kind of environment where you don't have a lot of money, you're going to eat less than quality foods. What these people don't realize is all that junk food they eat because it's, quote, cheaper. You could eat quality food by the same amount of money, buy quality meats, maybe a little bit of vegetables and things like that, nuts, seeds, and get all the nutrition you need, not have to eat as often, get plenty satisfied, taste good food, and it would be the same budget. We fool ourselves into believing that that $2 bag of chips is a much better option than that $3.50 string cheese that they could get for the kids, when they don't realize when they eat that bag of chips, they're still hungry. It makes them eat more of the other junk food, whereas that string cheese, they're not eating it as often and it's slower to go away. So in the end, it becomes more budget friendly to have the string cheese, even though in the moment $3.50 is more than $2. You see the games people play rationalizing their food choices. Janet says, my sister goes to the hospital. They say she's a diabetic. Then for her meals, bread, potatoes, and more. It's terrible. I got her on low carb. Her sugar is good. So far has lost 40 pounds. Janet, that's awesome. That's so awesome. Bonnie says, my husband chose to eat the crap and take the meds. Yeah, Bonnie, there are people like that. And they're going to have to live with their choices. My problem with that mentality is, as a medical doctor, why give that choice at all? You know it leads to destruction of the patient's health. Now, again, I guess you're empowering the patient to make the ultimate decision, and I'm all for that. But I don't think they're knowingly making a choice that they know the full ramifications of, which is why I think we need to be articulating that. Ferry says, that's the problem, but pill cures everything in most people's minds. They think that, but it never has. Sugar addiction is no less destructive than any other sort of substance abuse. Brain scans back it up. Yeah, Carrie Anna, I agree with you. I do see a lot of those studies that say that same part of your brain that gets excited by drugs gets excited by sugar. That should tell scientists and practitioners things of, okay, it excites the same part of the brain. Does that mean it's addictive too? Shocking. We need to be more aware of the insulinogenic index and load of a meal. Is it even a thing, or is it just glycemic index? Actually, glycemic load is the one that takes into account the amount of food that you eat, the kind of food, and all that. So glycemic load is better than glycemic index. More emphasis on insulin versus just blood glucose. Yeah, blood glucose, as we mentioned yesterday, knowing your blood glucose isn't going to tell you anything. You could have normal blood glucose levels and your insulin sky high, but you never know if you don't run insulin. But the problem is most doctors no longer run fasting insulin levels, and so you're kind of left guessing. And when you're in the dark about something, you really can't make an informed decision. Keto Chrissy Sue says, I just saw Subway in the hospital last week. They're there. And the only reason they're there is money, money, money. These hospitals need it. They think they need it to do the things they want to do. And so they sell their soul to these fast food companies. Dolly Mommy says, buying beef patties from McDonald's. Well, yeah, I guess that is the one saving grace if you're gonna eat something at McDonald's. But how many just go there and just eat the beef patties? Very, 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 very few. Let's see. Sue says, at physical therapy yesterday, a woman next to me stopped the physical therapist to eat a cup of applesauce. I told her to avoid sugar. She says, there's no sugar in applesauce. Physical therapist said it's natural sugar. Oh, geez. We're still fighting that one. And that's the games people play in their head. And what's funny is even like things like applesauce, sometimes they add extra sugar to make it palatable. And yet people, oh, it's applesauce. Oh, it's applesauce. People do the same thing with ketchup. They'll squirt all kinds of ketchup, and they've been told ketchup is a vegetable. It's like a tomato. What you don't realize, you look at the label of ketchup, and the high fructose corn syrup sticks out like a sore thumb as the first ingredient. It's crazy what people believe and how we've been bamboozled. Let's see here. Laura says there's way more money behind sugar pushing than there ever was on tobacco. I fear we'll never see a mainstream adaptation of no sugar. Best we can hope for is one less addict at a time. You're right, Laura. I do think it's going to be a tougher road. And you're right. Tobacco was easier because you only had a limited number of people, a certain percentage that smoked. Everybody eats. And so if everybody eats, everybody has a susceptibility for having sugar. And so, yeah, it will be a tougher road. I do agree with you. One at a time. One at a time. All right. Jess says, if you eat well, you don't need to snack. Exactly. Somebody's been listening to me over the years. Bonnie says, explain what natural sugar in fruits and if there's a better difference than added sugar. So, Bonnie, thank you for that. So, natural sugars that's in like an applesauce is what we were talking about, is what's the fructose that was in the apple. The added sugar would be external sources of sugar on top of that sugar in there to make it more palatable. So neither one of the sugars cares that they're natural, unnatural, whatever. All they know is when they get in your body, just as Dr. Cucuzzella said in his story, when they get in your body, they will have to be processed by the liver. The liver doesn't do well with fructose. Just doesn't. So that's what we're talking about. All right, let's go over to Facebook. Got a few seconds left. I hope we have time to get to a few comments because I know you guys came in over here with some good comments. Let's see. Yuck sounds about right, says Norma. Employee cafeteria is about the same. Yes, school cafeterias, employee cafeterias, they're all two peas in a pod. I'm so glad you're talking about this. I've always been blown away by what they serve in hospitals to patients. Yes. Money is all most of those places think about, not your health, which is a shame because most people come to the hospital thinking they're about your health. I thought they did take it out of schools, says Susan. No, public schools still have sugar in them. So, like I said, there's certain public schools that have decided to become sugar-free, but most of them still have chocolate milk and they brag about it. Oh, look what a healthy option we provide. What a good idea, says Susan. A warning label on packaging waving off consumption by kids. I wish it would happen. I really do. Our society is great at pretending and ignoring. Denial, our precious children are being sacrificed. And if you're a grandma or a parent, I hope you would stand up and do what's right. All right, so that's all the comments we have over on Facebook. Sorry, again, I can't see your comments there, but I do read your comments over on that Facebook page. But thank you guys for being here today. Keto Chrissy says, reading ingredients is so important. My family used to get annoyed. Now it's just my hub because my daughter's just like me. LOL. Sounds like you've got issues at home. Just kidding. Well, guys, that's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com, as always, is how you can access the past episodes. And you can also go over to YouTube, type in a keyword, search Jimmy Rants. You'll find the show. I'm also, if you want to watch the show live, I'm right here on Instagram. So if you're watching this on the replay on YouTube or if you're watching me on Facebook Live, go to Instagram, follow at Livin' Low Carb Man, LIVIN LOWCARBMAN. And once you're there, you will be able to see when I go live. And when I go live, we bring the Jimmy Rants, I promise you. So I will be back a little bit later on today at 5 o'clock to do another Jimmy Rants. I've got a podcast with Dr. Will Cole that I'm recording at 1 p.m. Eastern time today that will air not this Thursday, but the next Thursday, all about the coronavirus. So a lot of people are worried about coronavirus. I'm going to talk to functional medicine practitioner Dr. Will Cole, and we're going to get to the heart of what it is, whether we need to be worried, what you need to do to get in place. So stay tuned for that, you guys. Got a lot of really great content in store for you across all of my channels. So until next time, we'll see you then. All right.